Welcome to MacStories Unwind, a weekly review of everything MacStories and more. Today's show is brought to you by Concepts. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John Voorhees. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You know what? It has been kind of a barn burner week at MacStories. There's an American expression for you. It's a barn burner. You don't even they don't burn barns in Italy, I don't think.
So a barn is the thing that you have like outside the house where you keep like hay and other
and your animals
stuff,
and
and
your
animals.
tractor maybe.
And why your tractor? And why would you burn the barn?
I don't know where the expression comes from. You know what we'll do? I will research that. And then when we do our next MacStories Unplugged, our club podcast.
See, you're really good at selling this. Good job. Okay.
I am. I'm cross-promoted. We're gonna have an in-depth discussion of barn burners and what that means and where it comes from. So I'll put that on my list of things to do. I have another story, another question for you for that show about something I saw that supposedly is a very Italian thing, and
this never ends well. When you say supposedly Italian, this never ends well. Okay.
It's something that I don't understand at all. All right, let's dive in because we do have a lot of stories this week, and of course, probably the biggest news of the week was that WWDC was announced, which will, of course, be online only again. It was the artwork for the announcement is a take on the Craig Federighi meme of him opening up the M1 MacBook Air, I think it was, and peering at the screen. So it was kind of fun. And of course, there are apps reflected in the glasses of the cartoon people in the images that show the calendar app. And I think for the student one, it shows the Swift Playgrounds app. And of course, people decided, that must mean they're doing AR glasses, which I don't think that means they are, but I think that's still a possibility regardless. But it was kind of funny to watch as usual, people trying to make something out of the artwork. But it's going to be June 7th through 11th. So we've got maybe 9 weeks to get ready, Federico. Are you ready?
No.
Neither am I.
Well, I mean, I'm ready in spirit, but I'm technically not ready. I can't believe it's happening again. I'm obviously very excited about the next version of iOS and iPadOS. Obviously, I'm sad that this is going to be an online-only event. It's the right thing to do right now. There's a few people, including our friend Mike Hurley, who believe that WWDC in person is never coming back.
Yeah, I sure hope he's wrong.
I really hope he's wrong. I really hope that in the future we'll have some kind of hybrid event where the in-person WWDC will come back, but the online component is not going away, because I totally understand how being able to have virtual labs and follow each session whenever you want. Like, I totally get the benefits of the online format, but I think also, like, as soon as I don't know if we can say when the pandemic is over. I don't know if it's an expression that we can use yet.
As soon as it's under control, I guess.
When it's under control and when we have some kind of new normalcy again, because it's going to be a new sense of normal. But when that happens, I really think we as a society in general, in Italy, in the US, wherever, I really think we are going to crave that social contact again. And I know that a lot of companies are saying right now, no, but the pandemic showed them why working remote and why working from home has so many cost-saving benefits. I totally get it. I also believe at the same time that we as a species, we crave human contact. And for that reason, I don't think events are going away.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And you're, of course, hearing this from two people who work remotely and mostly work by themselves most of the day. But we, too, crave some contact with family and friends a little more than we've had over the last year plus at this point. Yeah. Well, I sure do hope that it does become an in-person event again. I am still looking forward to it. Apple did a great job last year, and I expect whatever lessons they learned, they will improve on it and make it even better this year. So we'll, of course, at MacStories, we'll have a ton of stuff going on. I think you can expect a lot of the similar things to what we did last year, but Federico and I, we aren't ready. We have not even really talked about this in depth, so we'll be planning over the next several weeks and have more details to tell people in the future. The other thing related to WWDC that happened is that the Apple developer app was updated. And, I know that this isn't an app that maybe most of the listeners of this show use, but it is an important app for developers and people like us who are covering what Apple is doing. And the old app really wasn't very good on larger screen devices, primarily the iPad and the Mac. And it is much improved. The Discover tab, which is where you go to kind of find a mix of news and video sessions, has been redesigned in a way that makes it maybe a little reminiscent of something like the music app with a tile interface with a lot more content displayed at one time. So you can kind of see more of what Apple is featuring at one time. And I like it. I mean, there's a bunch of other changes. The sidebar is more of a traditional, the new modern sidebar for the iPad that's collapsible by section. The tab bar is completely gone in the iPad app, and everything has been moved to the sidebar. And that it just opens up a little more vertical space for the content and also makes it a little easier with the collapsing sections to navigate vertically through the different things that they offer in that app, which is a lot.
Yeah, I really like the new design, and I appreciate how it takes better advantage of bigger screens. So I think, and especially with the search improvements, this is going to be one of the apps that I'm going to use a lot during the research stage for my annual iOS review. I'm really glad to see this kind of UI updates because the previous app was not that great, especially on iPad and on the Mac.
Right. The search is a good point because it is easier to find things. A couple of reviews this week, too. The first one was the HoverBar Duo, which is a review that I did of 12 South's new stand for the iPad. And actually, it works with everything from an iPhone on up. I briefly tried it with my phone, and I don't really see a lot of use cases for putting your phone in a stand, but it works great with the iPad. And it's got kind of a sleek, modern design to it. I think I would have preferred it to be a little more metal and a little less plastic here and there. On the other hand, it's got two hinges. The bottom hinge swivels on the base, back and forth, and a ball joint at the clamp so that you've got an incredible amount of adjustability here. And it really does make a difference. For a while, I was wondering why it was that I like this stand so much better than ones I've used in the past. And it's because of that adjustability, because with it, you can put it just about anywhere and have it fit into whatever your setup is a lot better. And for me, oftentimes that is next to my display for my Mac. And by having that minute adjustment that I can do, I can have it so it's really, truly a second screen that sits there right at the perfect height next to my display for my Mac Mini and gets more use that way instead of feeling kind of off to the side and in the corner. So it works great for that. And it's I think it's $80. So
nice.
Check it out if you're looking for a stand. I highly recommend it. The other review I did this week, Federico, was Darkroom 5.2. And Darkroom's an app that we've covered before on the site. It's a photo editor, and it won an Apple Design Award just last year. And this update brings a flagging feature to it. So you can flag and reject photos. And that's not a feature that's new to photo apps in general, but it is new to Darkroom. And I think their implementation is really nice. One of the places I like it the best is on the smallest device where I use Darkroom, which is my iPhone, because you just swipe over on the bottom toolbar and you enter the flagging and rejecting mode. And when you tap flag or reject, it automatically advances from one photo to the other. So it's kind of almost like a game on the iPhone. It's like you can stand there in the line at the store or something and quickly go through maybe 10 photos, maybe 15 photos, figuring out which ones you want to keep and which ones you want to get rid of. And for photo management, that's a great thing to have. Of course, it also works on the iPad and on the Mac. I haven't tried it on the Mac yet, but both on the iPhone and the iPad, it's a really great addition and kind of takes the app. Its roots is in photo editing and filters, but it's really made it a more broad-based and well-rounded app, having these management features added that make it easier to figure out which images you want to keep and which ones you want to get rid of.
Nice. This week in music news, I covered one of the latest updates to Spotify. So Spotify has been on a roll lately in terms of rolling out new features and interesting additions to the Spotify experience. The latest one is the launch of Spotify Mixes. So Spotify Mixes are these personalized dynamic playlists that will update over time. And they are the sort of the spiritual successor to the daily mix, which Spotify first introduced 5 years ago in 2016. Spotify mixes are organized in 3 main categories. You will now find in the new Made For You hub of Spotify artist mixes, genre mixes, and decade mixes. So the idea is that the service will generate for you algorithmically using a combination of songs that you already know and songs that the service thinks you might like. These different flavors of personalized playlists that are based on artists that you like, on particular decades for music that you usually listen to, and also music genres. It's a very cool feature. I already got it in my own Spotify app in the new Made For You hub. And it's one of those things that makes you appreciate Spotify as a service that has a focus on personalization and discovering new music. So I really I especially like the idea of the decade mixes, because it makes it super easy to, say, shuffle music from the 90s, for example, without having to think about it too much, or without having to find a curated playlist, or without having to assemble a queue on your own. So you can find the Made For You hub in the search page. Just tap on the search icon in Spotify, and Made For You is one of the main categories in the grid that comes up when you click on search. Also in music news, Apple and other companies, including Alphabet, which owns Google, Apple invested $50 million into United Masters. So United Masters is this really cool company, sort of like a modern day record label that aims to essentially bring and support artists in the modern age of music streaming. So the idea is that United Masters helps artists connect to their audience, connect directly to fans, and give artists tools to say, sell merchandise or tickets, reach out to fans directly, all while retaining control of their master recordings, which has been a contentious topic in the music industry, more famously with the latest controversy with Taylor Swift and her previous record label. So I think it's interesting that Apple is investing, not acquiring this company, sort of as a sign that Apple and others believe that it's necessary for the music industry to approach the modern age of artists using social media to reach out to fans and trying to monetize their art and their craft with different means than just making money off of streaming and making money off of album sales. So more tools to sell merchandise, reach out directly to fans, and sell exclusive content, bonus material, behind-the-scenes material, obviously concert tickets for whenever concerts will come back. But even right now, virtual tickets to streamed concerts, which is a thing that a lot of artists are doing these days. I think it's a great sign, and I want to see what happens with this investment. I want to see what comes out of this, or if it's just Apple sort of saying, we want to give back to the music industry and we want to help in any way we can.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting to see where that goes. I think it's a interesting and intriguing idea too. Let me ask you one thing about Spotify, which is, when I use Apple Music, I have various playlists available to me that Apple creates that are decades-based or genre-based and that sort of thing. But what you're talking about is a little different, because it's actually a reflection on your music tastes as well as what Spotify thinks you'll like, right?
Yes. So it's a combination of songs that you already know and that are already in your library, combined with the algorithmic suggestions that the Spotify algorithm thinks, if you like Placebo from the 90s, you're probably also going to like Smashing Pumpkins, which doesn't necessarily apply to me because I already know and listen to both artists, but that's the idea. It's a mix of stuff that you already know and stuff that you might like based on what Spotify thinks.
Yeah, that's really great. I really ought to check that out and give it a try myself. We had a couple of different news items for mapping this week too, and the first one that hit was Apple and Apple Maps have rolled out COVID-19 travel guidance for airports worldwide. They've teamed up with the Airports Council International for listing these guidance regulations and requirements for over 300 airports worldwide, which is really nice. I mean, when I checked it out, I was able to find one of our 2 local airports here in Chicago. I saw the guidance for Los Angeles, Tokyo. Then I know later in the day, Rome's airport showed up. So I think, with 300 plus worldwide, that ought to cover most of the major airports in most countries. So check it out. I mean, it's nice because obviously different governments around the world have different requirements for travelers at their airports. And this way, before you leave home, you can see what the requirements are and make sure that you're in compliance. Also, Google had some announcements about its mapping app. A lot of these aren't out yet, but some of them are. One that is something called Indoor Live View. And Live View has been around, but not indoors. And what this will let you do is when you're in an airport or a transit center or a shopping mall, it can use AI to figure out where you are and which way you're looking, and show you how to get to things like particular shops in a mall, or maybe the restroom or an exit, that kind of thing, which is really helpful. And I know that that's already implemented here in Chicago somewhere in some of the shopping malls. I haven't been in a shopping mall for more than a year though, so haven't had a chance to try that out yet, but hopefully sometime soon. And then they added new weather and air pollution layers. Some of the air pollution stuff is a little bit like what came in Maps in iOS 14, which has the information about zones, pollution zones in certain cities around the world where you can't drive into a certain area depending on pollution and that kind of thing. And then finally, they've added, or they're going to add, routing based on eco-friendly routes. So if there are 2 routes to get you to a particular destination, and they'll take about the same amount of time, but maybe one of them's more downhill, so you use less gas driving there. Google will start suggesting that instead of the one that requires more fuel.
iOS 14.5 Beta 6 came out a few days ago, and the major change in this beta is the introduction of 2 new English-speaking Siri voices, as well as the fact that these voices are no longer gendered, and iOS no longer defaults to picking what used to be called the female voice of Siri. Now you will be able to choose the Siri voice that you want to use yourself. Now, as I mentioned, these voices are, first of all, they sound great. They sound really nice, and like such an improvement over the older Siri voice. But more importantly, they are no longer gendered in settings. So instead of being called American female or American male, they're simply called voice 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you can go in settings and you can pick the voice that you prefer. Now, I think this is great on all fronts. The fact that they are no longer gendered, the fact that there's new voices that sound great, and the fact that there's no default that the company picks for you, but you can go in settings, and I assume when you're setting up Siri for the first time, during the setup process, pick the one you like the most yourself. I think this is the right approach. The new voice sounds great. Hopefully, Siri will also be more intelligent in iOS 15. But
I hope so.
For that, we'll have to wait.
Yeah, and they also improved some of the voices for particular languages too, right? Like I think Italian and Russian and maybe 1 or 2 others.
Yeah, they're using the new neural TTS technology to improve the Siri voice, but I haven't tried it myself because I don't use Siri in Italian. I would if I could use 2 languages at the same time, like I can with the Echo, where I can use the assistant in both English and Italian at the same time. But on iOS, I gotta pick one language, and for that reason, I choose the English Siri.
Right. All right. Well, to round out what was on the site this week, I also linked to an article that Jason Snell wrote over on 6 Colors, all about the use of shortcuts on the Mac, or the lack of use of shortcuts on the Mac, and his case that he's built for why it should be brought to the Mac. And this is a fantastic post. I mean, there's a lot in here. Jason goes into a lot of detail about the fragmentation of automation on the Mac, the fact that there's no crossover integration between iOS and the Mac for automation at all, and a whole bunch of other things. A lot of the topics that we've talked about, me and Federico, on App Stories in the past. So we linked to that this week. It's definitely worth reading. I added some of my own thoughts about the topic in the link post. So if you want to see that there, although you've probably heard many of those things from me in the past, I just got them all down in one place, which was kind of nice. And I just found myself, as I read Jason's story, nodding throughout, because he really understands the benefit of shortcuts on iOS and iPad OS. And as someone who's a longtime Mac user, he had some great insights as to how that could be implemented on that platform as well.
On Club Mac Stories this week, John, first of all, we sent the March issue of the monthly log, where
right.
Yeah, that actually came out
Seems like a month ago.
It feels like a month ago already. So I wrote about my experience with 3 months using Spotify. It's been just a little over 3 months since I first switched to the service, and I sort of elaborated upon the latest news from Spotify, and I shared some additional thoughts on what's it like to switch to Spotify from Apple Music and how the experiment is going. And John, you wrote about what you would like to see from the next version of macOS at WWDC. You mentioned that you want to see a bug fix release for macOS, which I don't think you're gonna get, but I think I agree with you. Having at least mentioning stability and bug fixing as one of the tentpole features, that would be a nice gesture from Apple, I think.
Yeah, it would be. I don't feel like this needs to be a mountain lion release where the focus is entirely on bugs, and I do think Big Sur is an improvement over Catalina in that regard. However, there are still things that are a problem all the time, like Bluetooth connectivity. So yeah, I think that's got to be one of the things. But there are a whole bunch of others. I'd like to see a lot more done with both Control Center as well as Notification Center, and a few other things.
Yeah. And in MacStories Weekly, so you also wrote about the Mac in MacStories Weekly. You had a tip about Bartender, which is the excellent menu bar utility that lets you customize the items that you see in the macOS menu bar, and it sort of creates its own menu bar. There's a new version that has been out for a few months now that is really good. I use it myself, so go check out that tip. And you also recommended Highlights, which is the excellent PDF annotation tool that you can get. I think you can get it on all Apple platforms, right? It's on iPhone, iPad, and the Mac. Nice. We had an interview with Dave Verwer from iOS Dev Weekly, the excellent, one of the few newsletters that I also subscribe to myself. Really, really good newsletter if you're an iOS developer. And I had an in-depth extension column about the latest experiment in my long read later journey. And I think I may have finally found the place where I'm going to rest and call an end to this adventure. I don't want to spoil the surprise, but I guess I have to, because if you want to know more, go check out MacStories Weekly. I bought a Kobo e-reader. So I bought the Kobo Forma e-reader because this is I was told about this by an App Stories listener a few days ago. You can, on Kobo, install you can have a Pocket app. So this device lets you combine books and read articles that you saved into your read later queue in Pocket in the same device. So you can read articles from your Pocket account on an e-ink display. And it's amazing. It's sort of I wrote in the story how it's almost like the dream come true for me, how I can have a separate device that combines, that has this focused reading experience and reading environment, and combines books with articles from the web. But at the same time, unlike my previous solution for this, which was using a Kindle and the push to Kindle service, this doesn't have to be, and it's not a siloed off service. It's your Pocket account, which means if you don't want to read stuff on the Kobo because maybe it's a shorter story, or maybe it's got a video that you want to play, you can use Pocket on your iPhone and on your iPad. So I wrote about how the Kobo format differs from the Kindle Oasis that I have, and what the experience of using the Pocket app on the Kobo is like. So go check that out. There's plenty of photos and screenshots in MacStories Weekly, issue 266.
I was very surprised by this. I did see you have an interaction on Twitter with one of our listeners of App Stories, and I wondered whether you were going to go down this path, but it wasn't clear to me whether you were actually going to do it. So yeah, it's a really neat story, and Federico's, I think, found a really nice solution to combine those things on one e-reader. This week on App Stories, speaking of our weekly podcast, we talked about Apple at home and Apple's strategy, or maybe its lack of strategy in the home, because we talked about hardware, we talked about HomeKit, we talked about automation, we talked about everything, and especially in light of the recent cancellation of the original HomePod and the kind of long in the tooth Apple TV, it seemed like a perfect time to talk about this stuff. Now, maybe we'll have an event sometime in the next month or so, and maybe if the rumors are to believed, we'll see a new Apple TV, and there may be some more clarity as a result on where Apple is going with its whole home strategy. But right now, it's pretty confusing, and I'm not super optimistic, but I hope I'm proven wrong in that we have a much clearer view on that sometime in April. All right, Federico, let me tell you about our sponsor for Unwind and all of MacStories this week. And that is Concepts, which is an app that I use and love. It allows you to sketch, take notes, and explore endless ideas using its infinite canvas for the iPad. You can draw with Copic colors, with liquid pens and brushes, and organize images, text, and sketches into visual mood boards. It's an app that's used by creative professionals for visual thinking, note-taking, team communication, storyboarding, product design, and architectural planning. I mean, it's a really versatile app. It's amazing the kind of things that you can actually do with it. Everything you draw in Concepts is flexible because they are editable vectors, which is a huge feature to have. Allows you to scale from tiny to really huge. You can nudge, edit, and reorganize your ideas with natural finger gestures. You can drag and drop images and objects onto the canvas for fast ideation and reference. And you can use layers and grids to organize your work too. Plus, you can even do things like markup PDF documents and apply real-world scale for professional design projects. Of course, everything can be exported and shared as standard high-resolution and vector file types for flexible work between teams and apps. Concepts also has a built-in presentation mode that lets you connect with others for live sharing and graphic discussions, as well as visual whiteboarding that you can use with teams and clients over Zoom, which is a pretty neat feature and one that I'm sure would help a lot of people during the pandemic. The app comes with a free basic sketching tool, but you can also unlock over 200 plus libraries of brushes, objects, and services via a subscription or a one-time purchase. Right now, we have a special deal for listeners of this show and MacStories readers, which is you can get a special 1-month extended free trial when you sign up for an annual subscription. So go get that special 1-month trial and give this app a try, because I think you're going to really like it. I'll have a link in the show notes too. Our thanks to Concepts for their support of Unwind and MacStories. All right, Federico, it's time to do our Unwind picks. So what do you have for me?
I have a TV show that I think I've mentioned on Unwind before, but the final season and the series finale recently aired, and I wanted to mention it again. So the TV show is called Superstore. It's really good, sort of a office type comedy show set in a department store, in a fictional department store in the United States. And season 6 just wrapped up. It's the final season. The show, I don't know if it was canceled, but in any case, the network ordered the authors wanted to do more of Superstore, but they couldn't get a renewal for season 7, so they wrapped it up in season 6. And the series finale is really nicely done, despite the fact that they had to adjust some of the storylines, some of the story arcs to fit in the shorter season. They were able to wrap things up nicely. I mentioned before, I think, how Superstore did a really nice job in dealing with the pandemic and talking about the COVID-19 pandemic and how that affected the workplace and the department store and the relationship between characters. They talked about it in a very effective and really lovely way, I think. And I just wanted to recommend it again because it's a really good TV show if you never watched it before. It starts off and it kind of feels like a ripoff of The Office, which is not a surprise because I believe the creator of Superstore used to work on the American version of The Office. But then it really finds its own soul and its own groove in starting with season 2, really. And it's a really, really good and heartwarming and fun TV show. I love the characters. I love many of the story arcs on Superstore. So go check out season 6. I bought it on iTunes. I don't know where else is available. I'm an old school guy and I buy my TV episodes from the iTunes store. I really recommend it. It's fun.
Well, I can tell you that at least it's probably available elsewhere too, but it is available on Hulu in the US if you subscribe to Hulu. And I watched last summer. I think I got through about season 3, then I put it aside for a while and I need to return to it. And now that it's wrapped up, I think I'll do that. My recommendation this week, Federico, is a movie, and it's Godzilla vs. Kong, which just came out this week. All right. Now, this is not high cinema, right? This is not super sophisticated cinema, but it's a whole lot of fun. It's just a lot of battling between a giant lizard and a giant ape. And I guess what sealed the deal for recommending this is the fact that one of the heroes of the movie is a podcaster. All right. He's a guy who's doing a conspiracy theory style podcast all about the Titans, and the Titans are these giant creatures, you know, Godzilla, King Kong, and the other creatures that they battle. And so he's doing a podcast and he's trying to uncover the truth about some conspiracies and things that are going on related to Godzilla. And so he and some other characters are the central players in this drama, if you can call it that. But the reality is, you know, it starts out with Godzilla wrecking an entire industrial complex in Florida, and then the next thing you know, they're in Hong Kong, where they have their knockdown, drag out fight between Godzilla and King Kong. And I won't spoil it, but as you can imagine, an awful lot of buildings come down in Hong Kong as a result of this. And it's just, I don't know, it's about 2 hours of very loud roaring of both Godzilla and King Kong as they battle it out. And I found it to be a lot of fun. So
nice.
Go check it out.
All right.
It's on HBO Max. It's actually,
fun.
I think it was released in theaters too, at least in the US a couple of weeks before, but it is on HBO Max now, so you can catch it there as well. Okay, Federico, that's it for this week. I want to thank our sponsor again, and that is Concepts. You can find me and Federico over at macstories.net. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram. He's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next Friday, Federico.
Ciao, John.